I began a project recently that utilizes this live edge cherry lumber, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to teach you some of the methods that I use when working with live edge wood. Whether you're just creating one single live edge shelf or a whole live edge tabletop, the techniques and methods that I use in this video can be transferred into your wood shop to help you get that project done with more efficiency. When working with live edge wood, the first thing that you want to decide is whether or not to keep the bark on. For this specific example, I'm going to be removing the bark, and I'll be removing the bark with a dull chisel as to not damage any of the live edge. Some of the factors to weigh when deciding whether or not you want to keep the bark on include whether or not you're going to be running this lumber through a planer, and if so, I would recommend removing the bark, as you don't want to run it through your planer with the bark on. Another factor to weigh is whether that bark is structurally sound or not. If it's not and falling off, it's probably going to be hard to keep that bark on the entire project. The last factor, and probably the most important, is whether or not you prefer the look with the bark or prefer the look without the bark for your specific project. I noticed by using a dull chisel, I was able to knock off the bark without chiseling away at the live edge. Now, at this step, you're going to be removing the bulk of the bark. However, it's still not going to have a clean look, but this is all rough work in nature. At the end of the project, we can clean that live edge up perfect and get it ready for finishing. Now, once the bulk of the bark is removed, you can go ahead and take a bristle brush and clean that wood off for the next step of your project. Now that we've debarked these cherry boards, we're going to start working on flattening the faces on both sides. I'll begin this process by rough cutting the length so it'll fit on my planer sled. For this specific example, I'll be using a planer sled to flatten one side of these boards so I can flip them over and flatten the other side just with the regular planer. However, there's many options for you to flatten rough sawn boards like this. A couple of options that I recommend include a router jig, a hand plane, or a large capacity joiner. In my specific shop, I have a 6-inch joiner, which is far too small to house these boards that I'm working with for this current project. But that's why I designed this planer sled so that I can accurately and efficiently flatten one side of rough sawn boards. If you're interested in building and using a planer sled, I'm going to leave a link in the description below for my free plans as well as the build video of this planer sled. Once you have this board properly aligned on your planer sled, you'll go ahead and machine plane the top side until it's flat. If a planer sled like mine or a planer sled of a simpler design doesn't suit your needs as well, I would recommend using and building a router jig. They're fairly simple to build, and once you have it all set up, it produces accurate results. I can also say, after many boards planed with this planer sled, that it is also highly accurate and produces great results. Recently, I've begun to use live edge wood on far more projects, and I've noticed that the best deals that you can get on live edge wood often come from local mills. In fact, it's hard to ever find live edge wood in any store around the area. Oftentimes, you have to order it online, go to maybe a specialized woodcraft store, or you're going to have to find a local mill. I think the ultimate solution would be having a DIY sawmill at your shop, and that's something that I plan for the future. I think that would be so cool to take regular logs, mill them up with a sawmill, and be able to work on a project with your own milled live edge wood. If any of you have a sawmill at your shop or some kind of a DIY solution to mill your own lumber and make live edge wood, I'd love to hear about it. One thing you'll notice throughout my process is that I actually never go to the joiner to run the board through for any reason. With that in mind, if you're thinking about what kind of machines that you need in your shop or what's most important, I would definitely rank the jointer lower on the list, while a planer and a table saw would be higher on that list. Now we have all 4 of these cherry boards with one side completely flattened with our planer sled. Now we'll be able to flip that board over and plane the other side flat. We'll also be creating a 3/4 uniform thickness by using the turret stop on our planer. When using a thickness planer to create a uniform thickness for all your pieces, you're going to want to start with the thickest piece of lumber first and then work your way down. That way you're not repeating the steps one after the other, raising that planer blade up and down for all 4 boards. You can simply run them at the same time. When planing live edge wood such as this cherry board, I recommend planing a 32nd to a 1/16 of an inch each pass. Now we have both sides of each of these live edge cherry boards flattened, and now we need to proceed to get a straight edge on one side of each of these boards. To accomplish this straight edge cut, I'll be utilizing a jointer jig for the table saw. In fact, with some of these boards, it would be impossible to run it on the jointer in the first place, as there's live edge present on both sides of the boards and no workable surface to joint. Together, a jointer jig for the table saw and a planer sled for the machine planer can replace a jointer altogether. To use my jointer jig, I simply have to align the lumber on the jig itself and then tighten the board down with these clamps. Afterwards, I can use a framing square to measure out the ideal location to create the straight edge cut. Once the width of this cut is determined, I can go ahead and send the live edge cherry wood on the jointer jig through the table saw to create the straight edge. I think a jointer jig for the table saw is one of the most simple yet effective ways to create a straight edge on live edge wood. Another method that I have found useful is by using a circular saw with a straight edge clamped to the piece of wood. Now, this alternative method with a circular saw and a straight edge can be as accurate, however, it takes longer to set up, so I prefer the jointer jig method. My simple jointer jig design utilizes PowerTech hold down clamps and a 36-inch T-track to be able to edge joint boards around 4 feet. If you're interested in building and utilizing a jointer jig for the table saw for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below of my build video for this specific jointer jig. By utilizing the techniques featured in this video, you can create a perfectly flat, squared, live edge piece of lumber in your own shop. If you have any questions about the techniques used in this video, please comment below and I'll be sure to respond. I've been using the cherry lumber featured in this video for a live edge shelf unit that I'm making. I really hope you enjoyed this shop fix video, and until the next video, take care.